All right. Welcome, my friends, to the Healthy Peaceful podcast. My guest today is Sultan Salah, who is an experienced practitioner and educator in the areas of Ayurveda, holistic healthcare, natural healing, and integrative medicine. Sultan has 6 years experience teaching and developing academic curricula and is responsible for developing two of the nation's accredited degree programs in Ayurveda at Maharishi International University. Sultan has studied Ayurveda for over a decade. He's also received extensive training in the following areas of traditional integrative health: nutrition, anatomy and physiology, herbology, and physical therapy. He is a passionate speaker, teacher, and student of the health sciences, blending practical experience with his breadth of knowledge. He has completed clinical training in India and has earned both undergraduate and graduate degrees in Ayurveda and Integrative Healthcare. Sultan currently consults as an Ayurvedic Healthcare Specialist through his business, Ayurveda for the Soul, where he offers client consultations in restoring balance, including the seasons, as well as Vedic counseling and coaching. A sampling of his Vedic coaching services include unraveling abstract mental health issues, navigating major life decisions, Dharma coaching, how to discover and evolve in your purpose, trauma work, as well as ongoing support for mental, spiritual, emotional healing and evolution. He is especially skilled at teaching and facilitating our direct experience of the subtle forces and energies that are at play in our mind-body. Sultan's base is currently Santa Monica, California. Welcome, Sultan.
Thank you so much. Wow, what a beautiful and holistic introduction. I'm very grateful to be with you today. Thank you.
Well, that's quite impressive for 10 years. You packed in a lot.
I did. Somehow I survived. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So, so we're just gonna start off with, I know something that's important to you, and in looking at your website, Ayurveda for the Soul, is, Ayurveda is your conception, your thoughts on Ayurveda, your approach to Ayurveda is not necessarily, okay, here's your dinacharya. So tell me a little bit about that. You've referred to Ayurveda as a cosmic science of life. So I'd like to start there. What does that mean?
Sure. It's really what drew me to Ayurveda is the cosmic aspect of it. Ayurveda is often presented as a natural medical science and sometimes as an herbal medical science or a dietary and lifestyle kind of approach to health. But Ayurveda comes from the Vedic civilization. And that's really important because the Vedic civilization was a very unique one, not often taught in history classes, or really very difficult to find out much about that particular civilization. But that civilization was very, very concerned with what we might call enlightenment, not just for certain people in society, but really for everybody, but especially the leaders in the different areas of society, medicine and administration, even warfare. This particular civilization was concerned with what we could call an enlightened approach. And so Ayurveda is really a cosmic science. It's a cosmic system because it was born out of the consciousness of rishis or seers, or we could say sages and saints, as opposed to trial and error, or as opposed to modern medicine, which uses objective, outward research and investigation into medicine, where we can understand things in a kind of outwardly scientific way. Ayurveda was quite literally cognized in the awareness of the sages and rishis, seers of the Vedic civilization. So calling Ayurveda a cosmic science is not really a nice embellishment or a kind of fanciful thought. historically speaking, it very much is a cosmic science. We might say a spiritual science that might be more easy to understand, but again, because it was born out of the consciousness of an enlightened human, that's how and why we might call it a cosmic science.
Okay, wonderful. I notice on your website that most of the work that you're doing really centers around the most subtle aspects of Ayurveda. Mm-hmm. Really, Ayurveda and the mind, Ayurveda and spirituality, Ayurveda and emotions. Tell me a little bit about that. What brought you to, I mean, I'm assuming it relates to how you approach Ayurveda, but riff a little bit on that for me.
Sure. I think a really nice way to understand that is the physical body, according to Ayurveda, is one of 5 bodies. I'll try and it's a bit of a sophisticated concept, but I'll try and simplify it. Essentially, you are not your mind or body. You are your jiva. Jiva is the Sanskrit word essentially for soul. And when you incarnate into a human machine, as sometimes I like to call it, you're essentially incarnating into 5 layers. So in Ayurveda, it's called the Pancha Maya Kosha, which essentially means the 5 subtle bodies. And the physical body is the last and most gross, as in most surface level physiology or body. And then you have a mental body, a prana body, a knowledge body, a bliss body. And without getting too much into the technicalities of those subtle bodies, the reality is that those subtler physiologies have a greater determinant effect or a greater impact and influence on your overall state of health than your physical body. So, for example, if we have chronic, as a very surface level example, if we have chronic acid indigestion, we're just dealing with a hot gut, we're always dealing with a little bit too much acid production. It's one thing to take an herb to reduce acidity. And that's actually very often useful, but doesn't always handle the cause or the root cause of that acid. Whereas if we go to a subtler body, one step up is what's called the Manomaya Kosha, which essentially is the mental body. And if we were to address the tendencies towards anger in the mind, that would directly and more profoundly impact the experience of acid indigestion in the body. And it would be valuable because then you're also handling the anger tendencies in the mind. And so learning about how to take care of the body through herbs and diet is a wonderful part of Ayurveda. I really enjoy teaching it, really enjoy learning about it. I'm still learning every day. But the ability to directly perceive and engage with the subtler dimensions of a client that I'm working with has been something that I've always focused on in my training, and I've been very fortunate enough to have access to that quality of training, because, like in that example, it's much more profound to handle the deeper dimensions of an imbalance if we have access to that. So herbs are always useful, diet is always useful, but to be able to directly interface with the subtle bodies is really the one of the deeper values of Ayurveda.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good example as well. The Manomaya Kosha and the anger issues, and really addressing the root and not masking. So that's awesome. Thank you for that.
Right.
Yeah. Now you have said that Ayurveda, this might relate to what you said about Ayurveda being a cosmic science of life, but you've also referred to it as the science of the universe, and that it's not even a medical science.
Right.
we don't often hear Ayurveda. We certainly do hear about it, the science of the universe, the science of life, but we don't often hear about Ayurveda not referred to as a medical science. So tell me a little bit about your thoughts there and how that relates to the work that you do.
Sure. There are two values around that I could speak on. So the first is more liturgical, as in coming from the literature of Ayurveda. According to Ayurveda and in the literature, Ayurveda is the science of life. And as you and many of your audience must know, it's the science of life. But there's no implication that means the science of health. There are certainly scholars who believe that what is implied in that, or what they mean by that, the science of life, is that it is regarding health. It certainly is one part of it, but
that's a great point, because I do think most people think about it as a science of health. So that's just a simple point, but really profound.
Right, and it makes sense because life is more lively when there is health, and
right.
It's a natural implication to make. Plus, the vast majority of the literature and the Vaidya or Ayurvedic doctor family lines that are still present today. So again, the majority of the literature and the majority of the family traditions that are still going really speak to health more than anything else. But as one of the great Vaidyas that I've studied with once told me, the literature and the knowledge that we have regarding Ayurveda on this earth right now, it must be somewhere between 0.001 and 0.002%. And again, it's because Ayurveda is not a medical science, and it's not even a science that is exclusive to this planet. And so the second point to speak to why and how Ayurveda is a cosmic science, not even a medical science, is that in the Vedic literature, it is described very clearly in a number of ways and in a number of parts of the Vedic literature that when Brahma, who is a Vedic deity, who is said to be the creator, often equated with the creator God, Brahma is said to be the deity that actually created the physical universe. And it's stated very clearly that when Brahma finished creating the universe, Brahma remembered Ayurveda. And the thinking here is that Brahma has created the universe or universes many, many times. And Ayurveda is the blueprint, really, to creation. So it is the science of existence. It's the science of the universe. It's like the software of the hardware of creation. And it says that when Brahma finishes creating the universe, he remembers Ayurveda and enters into discourse with Shiva and relearns all of the nuances and details of this cosmic science. So again, Ayurveda is not a medical science. It's not even a science exclusive to this planet in that sense.
Wow, that's really amazing. So there's just so many things in what you just said, the remembering and the discourse, and how this wisdom is going to manifest, or was obviously already existed, and there's that remembering, which actually relates to, in some ways, our own remembering of who we really are, and our misremembering. Do you have any comments regarding that? How our misremembering is what creates the problems, and how we can move toward that memory of who we truly are?
That's beautiful, and part of why I'm so honored to be interviewed by you, hosted by you. it's a wonderful, very spiritual, very cosmic connection to make, because you're right, that lack of remembrance of, there's many ways we could say it, of who we really are, or of the nature of reality, or of truth. Somehow that disconnect or lack of being in a state of knowing of what really is, as you implied there, or as you said there, very much is the cause of imbalances according to Ayurveda. And again, this is yet another reason why Ayurveda is a cosmic science. Ayurveda is very clear that that there is one fundamental cause of all disease. There's just one ultimate cause of disease. And as you've said, it's essentially a lack of remembrance of who we really are. The technical term is pragya aparad, which essentially means, there are many beautiful ways to describe it, but it essentially means mistakenly understanding creation to be something other than what it is. So it's a state of consciousness where you're not familiar with who you really are, and as a result, you're not able to see the reality of creation, and it leads to mistakes. And that pragya aparad, which is essentially a technical term for a lack of enlightenment, really is the cause of all disease. So a lot of Ayurvedic doctors and a lot of holistic practitioners of any system of medicine, even modern medical doctors, will often say we have to address the cause to really handle this disease. Well, Ayurveda is beautifully sophisticated, but also unfathomably simple. And one of the simple aspects is there is one cause of all disease.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. That's really amazing. Yeah. So, I know that you've studied Ayurveda with many teachers, but particularly you spent time, and I believe you still are teaching at Maharishi University, or continuing to develop curricula. And in Maharishi Ayurveda, there's the principle of consciousness is primary. And could you talk a little bit about being established in being and what that means for the remembering, the balance, being connected to who you truly are?
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's really, it's where I give credit. It's actually to whom I give credit, that I would have this understanding and experience of the cosmic realities of Ayurveda. And it would be Maharishi's teacher. That particular Vedic tradition has done a wonderful job preserving the integrity of Vedic knowledge over the vast millennia of this planet. And I remember I was first studying Ayurveda at Maharishi International University years ago, and we would watch some of these tapes or lectures of Maharishi speaking on Ayurveda. And it was maybe the third or fourth tape that I realized Maharishi was not really talking about Ayurveda the whole time. He's really been talking about consciousness.
Yeah.
And really, most of Maharishi's lectures on a range of topics, if you pay attention, for the most part, he's not really addressing the topic. He's addressing the fundamental value of consciousness within that topic. But so Maharishi really, really, because of his tradition and his own state of consciousness, was very often highlighting the fundamental nature of consciousness in any discipline, and particularly Ayurveda. Ayurveda is a very outward science in many ways. You're balancing the mind, you're balancing the body, you're balancing the emotions, the hormones, the biochemistry. But its connection to pure being and its connection to consciousness is is again foundational to the entire science. And Maharishi was always pushing for that to be well understood by the student and practitioner of Ayurveda. And Maharishi would often refer to Ayurveda as a consciousness-based system or a consciousness-based science. And he eventually moved into this general categorization of all medicine being, it should be essentially a consciousness-based healthcare, where we have modern medicine, nutrition, and acupuncture, Chinese medicine, all the different systems of modern and traditional medical sciences, but it should be consciousness-based, which really, again, is essentially the inspiration to develop consciousness in the patient and also in the practitioner. And that really being the primary medicine. There's a beautiful lecture of Maharishi essentially saying that the only real medicine is the development of consciousness. That an herb for a dosha, you have a vata imbalance, and you take Brahmi, and your nervous system biochemistry settles down, and your neurochemistry harmonizes and evens out. That's wonderful. But really, it's not what Maharishi would call medicine. Medicine is the development of consciousness, which is a very specific and technical development. It's not some abstract thing where you just kind of float around and enjoy. There are real methods of developing consciousness, and many wonderful methods. And that actual process is really the only medicine. So Ayurveda, Maharishi did a wonderful job of contextualizing Ayurveda as a consciousness-based science, and that it should remain so. There are many schools and presentations of Ayurveda that really focus on the herbal and dietary aspects, which is wonderful and definitely very, very valuable still. But the more we look at Ayurveda as a science, the more we see that the word for health in Ayurveda is swastha, which sva means the self, as in the soul or your own consciousness or your own being, and sta means to be established. And so the word for health is essentially a technical term for enlightenment, a state of developed consciousness. And so you don't have to look very far into Ayurveda to see that it is what we might call a cosmic science.
Beautiful, thank you. I want to talk about the doshas, and it relates to what we're talking about. There seems to be, tell me about the doshas and how you view the doshas versus what the literature that we read, or sort of, if we Google doshas, the sort of things that come up with vata, pitta, kapha, and bring it into your approach to Ayurveda.
Yeah, one thing I always teach my students when I train them in the pulse reading technique, which is an Ayurvedic diagnostic method where we can assess the condition of the doshas in ourselves and in others. And one thing I'm sure to emphasize with my students is that it's much more important for you to see and experience the doshas in yourself and in others, rather than memorizing all of the details and having a well-developed left brain memory
right
box.
It's you're talking about more of an experiential approach.
That's right.
And a practical approach versus simply being in your head.
That's right. And so the doshas they are fundamental intelligences. In fact, they're living intelligences. I don't know how much I'll get into that. It depends on the amount of time we have, but essentially the doshas are intelligences. Maharishi liked to use the word governing. They're governing intelligences. And in modern terms, we might refer to them as quantum energies, subtle bodies, energy bodies that have governing values. Those words might help to picture it, but really they are very abstract, amorphous, very fluid energies that govern the majority of the physiological functions, the majority of the physical body. And their condition, the condition of those intelligences, is a precursor to health or imbalance. So as much as we try to fight acid indigestion with antacid medications, until we balance the dosha related to acid in the gut, it's bound to keep coming back. And
Right.
so these intelligences are fundamental, again, to the state of our physiology, somewhat the state of our mind, but the mind has a different set of doshas. And that's another thing. But again, when I train and teach students, and definitely when I study and practice Ayurveda myself, the emphasis is on having a direct, what I call higher perception, utilizing higher faculties. So we have our five senses, we have our intellect and our ability to think and memorize and retain information. But there are higher faculties. And this goes beyond the modern conception of intuition. Intuition is a very abstract, kind of vague reference to many different possibilities. Higher faculties are really required to experience the doshas because, again, they are quantum realities. They are subtle realities. And so you have an interview with somebody as a practitioner of Ayurveda, and they say they have constipation, and your left brain catalogs constipation is vata. So I give them aloe and I do this, and that's the herb. That's great. That's still actually going to be more effective than many other things.
Sure.
But to really see the vata in their gut, in their mind, see the precursor that their mother's worry was the real cause of their worry, which is the cause of their constipation. There's no training for that, and it is there in the pulse, and it's there in the visual of the person.
Sure.
But yeah, direct perception is really something I emphasized for my own study and for my students within Ayurveda.
The doshas, I know you and I talked briefly about the doshas being they're these living intelligence, but also they're at the junction point between. Do you want to elaborate on that? What the meaning of that is?
Sure. Yeah. So Vata, Pitta, Kapha are, again, these quantum energies or intelligences, governing intelligences, and they exist on an immaterial level. They operate on an energetic, immaterial level. And your consciousness, if we take consciousness to be something akin to the idea of the soul, where it's just a pure consciousness, pure witness. There's no human constructs up there. You're not Noreen, I'm not Sultan. Up there, it's just really just pure consciousness. There's a junction point between that part of your existence and the physical body. There's a very important junction point where the doshas emerge, and the doshas are as if birthed into existence when you incarnate into a human body. So when a human body is created and piloted by a soul or piloted by a consciousness, there's a very significant energetic junction point where consciousness produces the operating intelligence of the physical body. And that dimension of your existence, where consciousness begins to create intelligences that operate your physical body, that dimension of your existence is hugely valuable to attend to in the pursuit of health. Some people are doing all sorts of natural and holistic kind of personal health care routines. And many of them are generally good, but not all of them are. Some people are running every day because it's good exercise. But if they could have a picture of that junction point where their vata first emerges, and if they could see what their vata needs, they might choose a different form of exercise. Generally, running can kind of increase vata. And if a person is already dealing with vata-related problems, even though running is a healthful practice, it isn't necessarily helpful for everybody. So if you have an awareness of that dimension of your existence, where doshas emerge, where doshas begin their operation, you can personalize your behaviors and your lifestyle practices and your diet to a much more nuanced and profound and impactful degree. And so, yeah, doshas are they emerge from a very subtle and significant part of your consciousness. And that junction point, again, is very valuable to attend to in the pursuit of health.
Beautiful. Thank you. Now, you've indicated that as an Ayurvedic practitioner, that the consciousness of the practitioner, which is beyond what we normally think about as intuition, like with the pulse diagnosis, that there are things that are revealed in the pulse that, such as ancestral, what's happening in ancestry. So tell me a little bit about that, and what do you feel about your own role as a practitioner, and what is helpful for Ayurvedic practitioners in terms of really being a force for healing?
Yeah, I would say the number one, the absolute, and I don't often, but I tend to enjoy speaking in absolutes, but the absolute most valuable way to train as an Ayurvedic doctor or healer of any kind is by engaging in spiritual development, engaging in something that develops your consciousness. Whatever approach you take to that particular act of developing your consciousness is directly related to your abilities as a healer. And so I would say that that's foundational. And it wasn't just my training through Maharishi's presentation of Ayurveda. One of my favorite stories is there was a very well-known Vaidya, Ayurvedic doctor in India, who saw this one.
Is this Dr. Raju, or I think I've heard you on an interview refer to him? Or
oh no,
okay.
I have many things to say about the Rajas, but wonderful Vaidjas. But this is Vaidya Triguna.
Okay, yes, of course.
Yeah, so Triguna is no longer with us in the flesh, but he was a very, very, very capable Vaidya. And one of my favorite stories of him is that he saw a woman and he didn't even read her pulse. And he looked at her and she said, "I've come, I have these health issues." And he looked at her and he said, "Before I can give you any herbs, you have to go and visit your brother." And this was her first time meeting him. And she broke down into tears and she said, "How did you know?" And he didn't really respond to that. He just continued and said, "Your family needs to embrace him again. And this is the cause of all of your family's health problems." And this woman, who I know indirectly, her brother had been in prison.
Well, that's interesting, because it wasn't just a cause of her health problems. He was actually
her parents and her other siblings.
He was actually extending it out to the family's health problems, and he didn't have the family in front of him.
That's right. That's right.
right?
And
Okay.
what turned out to be the case was that her brother had been imprisoned for
Oh,
some crime, nothing bad. He just had to serve a sentence. And the
mhm.
family kind of rejected him. Once he went to prison, they kind of disconnected from him and what's the word? Kind of shut him out.
Right.
And that was really what was that family
Mhm.
conflict turned out to be foundational. And this is again where that's not just intuition. That's not just a gut feeling. That is the direct perception of a much higher dimension of reality. He didn't look at her skin and say, oh, based on your skin, I can see that your brother. He had a higher level, whether it was with his mind's eye, whether it was clairaudient, which means a higher faculty using the auditory senses, or clairvoyant, and he
Okay.
saw something.
Right. Sure.
There are many different packages and
Yeah.
combinations of higher faculties, but that's always been one of my, and I have other stories of him performing similarly magnificent perceptions. And again, is that because he studied Ayurveda? Is that because he balanced his doshas? No, it's really because he developed his consciousness to an
Right.
extent
Yeah.
where he was familiar with who he really was, to an extent that he was able to perceive reality much, much more truthfully. And so, yeah, whenever I teach students and whenever it's appropriate with clients, it's not always what's right in working with
Sure.
a client, but whenever it is, I'll always encourage the development of consciousness by whatever means necessary.
Mm-hmm.
That's really
Mm-hmm.
the ultimate medicine. It's the ultimate tool for training as a healer, as an Ayurvedic doctor. And I speak to that from my own experience. I've almost every leap I've taken in my abilities and in my perception as an Ayurvedic practitioner, almost every leap, actually, I should say every leap, was preceded by a spiritual course or a spiritual experience or something in meditation.
Mm.
And and I think that that's not an abstract thing. It's not a fanciful thing. I think it's a direct result of the continued pursuit of a developed consciousness, which again was my first taste of Ayurveda coming from Maharishi. He was really saying that consciousness is primary, even
Right.
within this field of natural medicine.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that. So, um, let's see. I want to talk a little bit about spiritual rituals. And I mean, we can refer to them as dinacharya, but we don't have to. But are there particular rituals that you think, I mean, it may not be the same for everyone, but things that are helpful for people to really enliven their physiology and to um, really harmonize and practice?
Yeah. Uh, you may have heard this story. It comes from the Vedic literature, but there was once a long time ago a king who set up a competition to all the different Vajas, Ayurvedic doctors of the land. And the competition was to come up with one medicine that cost no money, was absolutely free, and could be done by anybody and would have a
Yes,
profoundly
yes,
good effect.
I think I know where this is going. Yes, yes.
That's right. That's right. And the competition, it went on, and everybody had some offer, but it didn't meet the criteria. You'd have to pay money. You'd have to pay money to travel to go get the herb. And
Right.
the one person who won was the one who came up with a walk in the early morning,
Right.
before and during sunrise.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
uh, there is a cosmic truth in that of all the different aspects of the dinacharya, of a daily routine, or of healthful lifestyle practices, a walk in the morning is again just because of all the different factors. It's easy, it's free, it's doable by most everybody, but it's also incredibly impactful. The way that your doshas, the way that your vata, pitta, kapha, the way that your agni and digestive system, the way that your mind operates for the rest of the day, if you take a walk in the early morning, the impact, what's that called? Not ROI, return on investment, but the ratio of effort to result.
The cost benefit.
The cost benefit. That's right. The cost benefit.
Like return on investment.
That's
evaluation.
Right. That's right. Is incredible. Just a 30-minute, even a 20-minute, even for clients who are so lazy, I'll just say, just go for 5 minutes. Just get up and walk around your block. The result on the operation of your inner intelligence for the duration of the day is great. And so, we can keep talking about Dinacharya if you like, but that would probably be the most significant one to highlight.
No, that's beautiful. Well, I think that, and I don't want to necessarily focus on Dinacharya, but more spiritual rituals, which Dinacharya can be obviously part of that in various aspects of it. But the morning walk, I think that, well, first of all, the early morning, you have the ojas in terms of the atmosphere, and the early morning sun, the connection with nature, and also the tranquility of the morning. So I just think that there's a really a very profound impact that can have. And also, I also like the fact that just making that time for yourself first thing, before you get on your phone or check email or attend to lots of other things that need to be attended to, is just really wonderful. I think Dr. Nancy Lonsdorf definitely recommends that quite a bit as well, the morning walk. So it's maybe, what do they say? Ginger is the universal herb or the universal spice, but maybe the morning walk is also a universal panacea. Right.
Yeah, that's well said. I agree. I would agree.
Any other spiritual rituals in terms of developing consciousness, or really bringing the client, the practitioner, evolving, that you think are important? And the result being better health.
A couple things come to mind. Let's see. Let's go with this one. So it's hard. I don't think I've ever met somebody interested in my services or interested in studying Ayurveda that hasn't believed in a creator or in a kind of higher consciousness being who is responsible for existence. And so I think I can safely say this, though I tend to, I like being diplomatic and really accessible to all, especially of any faith, including atheism. But Ayurveda does talk a lot about rituals revolving around certain prayers. The Vedic mechanics of prayer are very different. It's something I really like to speak on. I don't think we have the time today. But the kind of conventional idea, maybe Christian idea of prayer, is very different from a Vedic approach. And so, very, very briefly, in that morning period, even before you walk, some quality of a connection with that higher being or that creator of all things, some quality, whatever is right for you, even if it is a Christian prayer or a Vedic ritual or an actual yajna where you light a flame. There are many different ways to do it, and that would be a whole other talk in and of itself. But just, for sake of brevity, some quality of an internal mental devotional act to the creator has an insanely profound influence on the operation of your existence for the rest of that day. And so I definitely encourage that. Meditation could take the place of that, or it could be in addition to that. Ayurveda does, and the Vedic tradition, they do give specific rituals or invocations, we might say, or prayers, we might say, outside of meditation. But for some, meditation is sufficient. So that's one thing, which I could expand on if we have time or if you want. But another thing that's more practical and more surface, but very, very spiritual. There are prayers or Sanskrit expressions that are associated with this, but for sake of accessibility, I'll just keep it simple. Before you have your lunch, even before breakfast or dinner or a snack, really anytime you have food, this is good. But particularly with lunch, we generally, most people say a prayer before they eat or take some silence. But I learned from Avijah once, if you put your hands on your stomach, you put it on your abdomen just so that your palms are kind of facing your digestive organs, and you close your eyes and you thank the intelligence which governs your digestive system, which in Sanskrit is called Agni. And you thank and you give reverence to the Agni within.
Right.
And then you also thank God, or you thank creation. You could even say you thank nature for the nutrition in your food. And you essentially indicate to your Agni, thank you for your existence. Thank you for preparing to digest this food and to turn it into my physical body. Thank you to nature for the creation of this food. And thank you for eating and digesting this food for me, Agni. These are very general expressions, because it's best when it's really personal to you, whatever phrasing works and invokes that feeling for you. But that act also goes a long way. You can turn a meal that's not necessarily pacifying or balancing for the doshas for you, but that little spiritual ritual can create such a vibrance in the food and in your body that your body makes it work. And so, I think that would be another
beautiful.
Good, ritual.
I love that. Yeah. I love that. I have never, I've never heard of thanking the Agni, and I just think that's really wonderful.
Yeah, another little thing regarding that. That's very useful when you're
and also just actually physically recognizing, because it's the connection to the Agni by touching the stomach or the area of the digestive organs.
That's right. That's right.
I love that. That's sweet.
It's like offering a sweet gift to somebody in their home, because the home of Agni in the body is in the digestive system. So by putting your hands there and putting your attention there, you're not just generally thanking and saluting Agni. You're getting very personal and bringing it to Agni's home.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. So, well, thank you for sharing those, and I'm sure there's many more that people can invoke on a daily basis. So let's see what else I have here. I'm wondering a little bit about your own personal journey, and we'll maybe touch on it just briefly, how Ayurveda found you.
Ayurveda found me in a state of I don't want to be too much with my self-deprecating humor. Essentially, before I went to MIU, I was a very normal person. I somehow just got very lucky and became deeply spiritual overnight. And long story short, I was looking for a meditation, and because of my kind of thinking at the time, I went to Google and I Googled the best meditation to try and find the best meditation. MIU, Maharishi University, popped up, and I clicked on it. I saw Maharishi's face, and I just immediately resonated, knew this was the place. And I went to MIU to meditate. I didn't go to study Ayurveda. I was happy to see they serve organic food because I was into healthy eating. But I went to meditate. I went to get a degree in something, but also meditate. And I took a pulse course, an Ayurvedic self-pulse diagnosis course. And I didn't do it as a joke, but I kind of was like, what is this really going to do? I need 4 credits in an elective, so I'll take it. And I was very respectful. I took the course, but I wasn't taking it seriously. And about 2 weeks in, I just remember our assignment was, okay, go to lunch and read your pulse before you eat, and then read your pulse after you eat. And I just had this moment. I read it before. I was like, and then I ate my food, and then I read my pulse afterwards. And not just the contrast, but the information I was getting, it was as if somebody turned on a light bulb in my head, and I suddenly realized, not only is this legitimate, it's seriously valuable. The ability to read a pulse and to assess things and to effectuate change, positive change as a result. And my life just really changed from there on out. I dropped out of school to focus on meditation in India. I also created my own courses in Ayurveda at the university. They're called self-directed courses, where I created my own curriculum to go deeper into Ayurveda. And I just basically have been studying it ever since, somehow ended up with a master's degree, no idea how. And so Ayurveda found me in a very kind of silly place, because I went to MIU for meditation and just by chance kind of fell in love with Ayurveda.
Yeah, well, that's wonderful. Thank you. And tell me about what you're doing currently in terms of Ayurveda for the soul.
Yeah, I just love helping people personally and teaching people, training others in Ayurveda, educating others. And so Ayurveda for the soul is mainly the entity through which I see clients. And most of my clients are recurring. I work with people long-term. I really like to give them all the dietary herbal things they need, but also the ongoing support, and people's health will enter into new chapters. Once we knock out your Vata imbalance, oh boy, do you have a hormonal imbalance that needs to be addressed next. And once you balance that, et cetera, et cetera. So but I'm also working on developing courses and kind of educational experiences, retreat quality experiences, where we can combine the training and education in Ayurveda with spiritual techniques, spiritual practices that focus on that element we've talked about of developing consciousness. And so that's what Ayurveda for the soul points to. Ayurveda ultimately being for the soul. It's not Ayurveda for even the doshas, definitely not Ayurveda for mental and physical health. I think Ayurveda as a science fundamentally is for the soul. And quite literally, this is kind of where I got it from, Ayurveda says that about itself in the literature, references that its ultimate goal is for the jiva, the soul, to evolve. And so that's the kind of mission statement and intention that I have within Ayurveda for the soul.
That's great. Yeah, thank you for that, because we can get so lost in the details that we can lose sight of the big picture. So,
right.
I actually listened to, you were on a podcast a few years ago, and you talked about wanting to be a world-class orator. Tell me a little bit about that, being a world-class speaker. Maybe has that changed for you?
No, it really hasn't. See, my father was a very, very, he passed away many years ago, but he was a very famous actor in the Middle East.
Okay. Wow.
And both of my parents are Egyptian. Egyptians are well known for being overly dramatic. And I mean, Egyptian soap operas are out of control. I've always loved drama. I've even really, in my spiritual practice, we avoid drama. We try to be diplomatic, but there's a part of my genes that just absolutely love it. And so yeah, my father was a tremendous actor, and it's definitely in my blood. I have a history of acting. And most of my lectures are very vocal. I'm very expressive with my hands, and my goal, my dream, really is, yeah, to travel the world teaching and orating, not just Ayurveda, but the general motivation to encourage spiritual development by whatever means necessary, and to even share stories, because I've read a ton of Vedic stories. I absolutely love the myths and legends and stories that come from the Vedic tradition. So many of them are beautifully relevant to the pursuit of health and to Ayurvedic principles. And so a lot of my lectures, I'll weave in stories coming from the Vedas. And so I think it's my nature to be like that. And my goal definitely is still to travel the world like that.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for that. Where do you see yourself 5 years from now?
Doing just that, actually.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah, I want to spend
great.
some time building a presence in California. I think it's a great home base for an Ayurveda practice. Yeah, definitely within 5 years, I'd like to be traveling and teaching and hosting courses and things like that.
Awesome. I have a couple of closing questions, more like rapid fire questions. And
sure.
As we bring it to a close, the first one is your favorite book about Ayurveda or anything else? I just figured.
About Ayurveda or anything else?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, my favorite book about Ayurveda is the Ayurvedic literature. I've really enjoyed reading the raw translations of the actual literature. But my favorite Vedic,
the text, the actual text.
That's right. There are many wonderful books on Ayurveda, but
Sure.
I've read the Ayurvedic literature itself many times. But my favorite Vedic story is the Ramayana, and I've also read that with great delight.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Who do you consider your greatest teacher? And it doesn't have to be just one.
Oh God. Technically, it would be Maharishi, because of how much I've learned about the nature of life and about how much I've benefited from the techniques of developing consciousness through him. I'd have to give it to Maharishi.
Okay, thank you. Where do you want to travel next and why?
Long-term, Europe, to enjoy teaching and doing the work that I've described. After some time in California, I'd love to tour Europe.
Okay. Any particular place in Europe, or just European tour?
I'm not
the European
too
journey.
familiar with Europe, so I think that part of it would be the exploration and the enjoyment of that. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Do you see Ayurveda as? Do you see any possibility of Ayurveda integrating with some of the other, like maybe the Celtic tradition or other healing modalities?
Absolutely. Okay. And
that I happen to be of the Celtic roots, so that's why I asked.
Oh, really? And have you studied aspects of
No, but it's something I'm interested in possibly combining.
Oh, beautiful. Oh, I love doing that. I've part of my ongoing training in Ayurveda is looking at other systems and finding the dosha related or Ayurveda principle related values. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are many, and I don't know much about I've actually looked into ancient Egyptian medicine, lots of beautiful remedies there. Castor oil is probably the strongest expression of an ancient Egyptian medicine. I use it very regularly. Ayurveda says wonderful things about it. But the future of Ayurveda is really recollecting, and this is a whole nother talk, I know we don't have time, but a lot of other traditions have gained similar levels of access to truth as the Vedic tradition. And the kind of recollection and, like you were saying, remembrance of all the different truthful aspects of life, really, not just medicine, is definitely the future of Ayurveda. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I like the fact that instead of recollecting, we're recollecting.
Right.
Which,
yeah.
which is so that's the same but different.
Right.
Right. Name, we talked a little bit about this, but name a daily ritual that you can't personally do without during the summer season.
Enjoyment. Making sure
I love that.
Yeah,
I love that.
yeah.
That's great, because summer is a time to enjoy.
Yeah. And this is
and sometimes people forget to do
ritual. Oh my God, especially the pittas. Especially the
Oh,
pittas out there. Please enjoy. Yeah.
Well, the pittas are busy accomplishing.
That's right.
Yeah. And okay. You have referred to the doshas as junction points. Can you describe one important junction point in your life and tell me why you believe it was important for you to experience it?
Within the context of Ayurveda, the main junction points in my life would be the moments where I felt a real upgrade in my consciousness, a real development take place. Those are really the most significant junction points. Those are a little abstract and inward, maybe even personal. But one Ayurveda related junction point was when I first met with a particular Vaidya in India, and he read my pulse. He told me about my health, a physical injury I had, about my mother's health. He told me about what my future would be health-wise. He knew what astrological period I was in. I asked him, what is my prakriti? What's my constitution? And he said, don't worry about your prakriti. You're in a Saturn period. And once you leave your Saturn period, your prakriti will even out. And I was in a Saturn period. Obviously, he had no way of knowing it. So that was a moment when I realized, oh my God, Ayurveda is not a medical science. It's not an herbal science. Like this person, this is a consciousness-based science. And so, yeah, that would be maybe the one I'd pick.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
And this last question is modern Ayurveda. What does this phrase mean to you?
Yeah, I think kind of like we talked a little bit about earlier, a kind of recollecting of truth. Modern Ayurveda would be a kind of collage of truthful aspects of developing health and consciousness across many different systems. I wouldn't call it a resurfacing of Ayurveda as it is in the text, because the texts are few in number. And really the truth of health and of life is found in many places and in many different forms. And so modern Ayurveda to me would be a beautiful recollecting of all the truthful aspects of life found across the globe into a very holistic, inclusive system that benefits as many people as possible.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Sultan. This has been really, really an honor for me to interview you.
Me too.
And to have you on the Healthy Peaceful podcast. Now, where can people find you? Social media handles, your website? I'll include it all in the show notes, but if you want to shout it out.
Yeah, it's all Ayurveda for the Soul. So ayurvedaforthesoul.com, Ayurveda for the Soul at Gmail. And my Instagram is Ayurveda for the Soul. So yeah.
Okay, great. Wonderful. Hang for a moment. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you again.
Yeah.